Coming up on this Thursday edition of Daybreak, working level officials from the two Koreas will meet this morning to discuss North Korea's participation in the upcoming Asian Games in the South. President Park's new look cabinet has almost taken shape after she formally appoints 5 new ministers who passed their parliamentary confirmation hearings last week. Plus, 4 Palestinian children have been killed after an Israeli gunboat shelled a Gaza beach. Deadly rocket and missile exchanges for the past 9 days have killed at least 213 Palestinians. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Thursday, July 17th. Here in Seoul, I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, the two Koreas will hold working level talks on this Thursday to hash out the details of North Korea's participation at this year's Asian Games, which kick off in mid-September in the South Korean city of Incheon. Given the North's recent attempts to calm inter-Korean tensions to some degree, watchers say there's a high possibility North Korean officials will make further peace gestures to the South during these talks. Yoo Li-an reports.
For the first time in about 6 months, the two Koreas will meet at the truce village of Panmunjom Thursday morning. 3 officials from each side will discuss a wide range of issues, including transportation and lodging for the North Korean athletes and cheer squad members, who are expected to make the trip to the South Korean city of Incheon this fall to participate in the Asian Games. But there's also a high possibility that North Korea may use the meeting to continue its peace overtures to the South. It's believed they may propose entering North and South Korean athletes on the same team for certain events, or even a joint cheering squad.
By normalizing diplomatic relations, it will try to get compensation to reconstruct its economy. To do that, inter-Korean relations should be restored, or there needs to be some progress made on resuming six-party talks.
Seoul has already said that putting together a joint cheering squad or team is logistically difficult, but the two sides will have more than one opportunity to hammer out the details.
The two sides met 2 to 3 times leading up to the 2010 Asian Games for working-level talks.
North Korea has been employing a dual offensive recently, laying out peace gestures and displays of aggression simultaneously. And all eyes are on how two Koreas will interact in Thursday's meetings. Yoo Li-an, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's top nuclear envoy says the recent warming of ties between North Korea and Japan should not hurt ongoing international efforts to denuclearize Pyongyang. Speaking with his Japanese counterpart in Tokyo on Wednesday, Hwang Jung-guk said Seoul supports Japan's efforts to resolve humanitarian issues, such as the kidnapping of Japanese nationals decades ago, but it emphasized that these talks should not hinder international efforts to resolve North Korea's nuclear and missile issues. Hwang's comments come after North Korea agreed to reinvestigate the kidnappings in return for Japan easing some sanctions on it. Now, Wednesday's meeting marked the first visit by Seoul's top nuclear envoy in nearly 3 years, as well as Hwang's first visit to Japan as nuclear envoy. Back here in South Korea, and turning now to President Park Geun-hye's new cabinet, which is finally taking shape after more than a few hiccups along the way. Now that her new team is basically in place, the president will push ahead with efforts to spur economic growth and reform the government. Choi Yi-sun reports.
President Park Geun-hye has appointed 5 of her cabinet nominees who were confirmed by Parliament last week. Her spokesperson said the president appointed Choi Kyung-hwan as the new finance minister and deputy prime minister and Lee Byung-gi as the head of the National Intelligence Service on Tuesday. She also appointed Choi Yang-hee, Lee Ki-kwon, and Kim Hee-jung as the ministers of science, labor, and gender equality, respectively. And despite the parliament's disapproval, President Park went ahead and appointed Chung Jong-sub as the new security minister. The president, who retained the current prime minister after her two previous nominees stepped aside and who withdrew her nomination for education minister Tuesday, cannot afford further delays in handing over state affairs to a new cabinet. After dropping education minister designate Kim Myung-soo, who was grilled by parliament over allegations of thesis plagiarism, President Bak quickly nominated Hwang Woo-yeol, her political aide and a prominent figure within the ruling party. Hwang is close to the president, and if confirmed by the National Assembly, he would join new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan as the president's two deputy prime ministers, a move likely intended to expand cooperation with the parliament. Meeting with the ruling and opposition parties' leadership in recent days, President Bak sought the parliament's cooperation on a series of bills to revitalize the economy and others to reform the government and public sector in the aftermath of April's ferry tragedy. Meanwhile, Culture Minister nominee Chung Sung-gun, who was not confirmed by the National Assembly, dropped his bid Wednesday morning. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
And in this next report, we're going to focus more on the new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan. During his first day on the job on Wednesday, Minister Choi promised aggressive fiscal measures to boost the economy. Na Hyung-kyung reports.
Low growth, a downsized economy in pursuit of better balance, an absence of notable results. I think this is the reality we are faced with.
New Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has made it clear that he will be proactive in his new role. In his inauguration speech Wednesday, Choi said passive macroeconomic policies have caused the Korean economy to slow down and have also resulted in less tax revenue. One of his plans to tackle those problems was to reform unnecessary restrictions that keep businesses from finding new investment opportunities.
When companies do well, they will, in return, create more jobs and up the earnings for households, which will spend more. We need to establish this virtuous cycle in order to strengthen domestic demand.
As he has long been hinting since being nominated, Choi reiterated plans to ease the debt-to-income and loan-to-value ratio regulations for mortgage loans to prop up the real estate market. Experts say the challenge will be doing so without drastically increasing already soaring household debt, on top of trying to boost consumer sentiment, which dipped after the April ferry disaster. Choi said the nation's growth outlook will have to be revised down and that an adjusted roadmap will have to be established, but added the ministry will not seek a supplementary budget this year. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Now, the clock is ticking for Korea's National Assembly to pass a special law aimed at uncovering the root causes of April's deadly ferry disaster. With just 1 day left of regular parliamentary session, lawmakers had hoped to come to an agreement on Wednesday on the so-called Seoul-Ho ferry law. The two party leaders from the ruling and opposition parties met on Wednesday afternoon, but unfortunately they failed to narrow their differences. The main sticking points remain. Who will be allowed to take part in the investigation? The lack of progress has further infuriated victims' families, who have been demanding the lawmakers adopt the law by the end of the day. Now, staying with politics, and the official campaigning period for the July 30th by-elections starts today. Ruling and opposition party candidates will compete in 15 districts around the nation, and they'll have 13 days until the day before the elections to persuade voters in their district. 6 of the 15 seats up for grabs are in Seoul and its surrounding areas, 2 and 4 in the Gyeongsang-do and Jeolla-do provinces respectively. 3 constituencies are in the Chungcheong-do provinces. Early voting will be available for 2 days, starting on Friday, July 25th, but voters will only be allowed to vote in their designated district polling stations.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
The governor of Korea's central bank has warned against lowering interest rates, saying that ballooning household debt here in Korea poses a major threat to the economy. Our economics correspondent and political correspondent Ji Myung-gil reports.
Mounting household debt, that's what Korea's central bank chief thinks is the biggest threat to Korea's economic health. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Joo-yeol expressed concern on Wednesday that household debt is rising at a faster rate than income growth, and that loan extensions are growing, particularly in non-banking institutions. Lee told an economic forum in Seoul that overall household debt is not expected to develop into a financial system failure, as high-income earners account for 70% of total household debt. But the low-income earners are having trouble paying off their bills. Those who spend more than 40% of their income servicing their debts accounted for 11% of debt holders last year, up from 9% from a year earlier. He was on same page with the new finance minister Choi Kyung-hwan that spurring consumer spending and corporate investment are the keys to bolstering growth. But he said lowering key interest rate leads to a rise in household debts, eventually hurting purchasing power. As for the overall economic outlook, he added that growth would recover in the third quarter of the year, but there were risks of lower than expected growth in view of the volatility of the Korean won and the lack of confidence among businessmen and consumers. The central bank lowered its economic growth last week by 0.2 percentage point to 3.8% for this year. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, the leaders of the BRICS nations are forging a multi-billion-dollar financial alliance. The world's top 5 emerging economies agreed this week to establish a development bank to rival Western-dominated institutions. We're talking about places like the IMF and the World Bank. Our Connie Kim reports on the landmark agreement that could radically overhaul the existing global financial order.
The leaders of the 5 BRICS nations have signed a deal to launch a $100 billion development bank and a currency reserve pool with the aim of challenging Western-dominated institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
This will not only help increase the voice of BRICS nations in terms of international finance, but more importantly will bring benefits to all the people in the BRICS countries and for all people in developing countries.
The new development bank, announced at the 6th BRICS Summit in Fortaleza, Brazil on Tuesday, will fund infrastructure projects in the founding members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as well as other developing nations. With its headquarters in Shanghai and India as president the first year, the bank will start out with $50 billion in capital, with each BRICS country paying in an equal amount. Total capital is expected to eventually double to $100 billion. A so-called contingent reserve arrangement will also be created where each country will put in a designated amount in case of a currency crisis. The contingency fund will amount to $100 billion, with China contributing $41 billion, followed by Brazil, Russia, and India putting in $18 billion each, and South Africa chipping in $5 billion. BRICS represents about 42% of the world's population and accounts for roughly 1/5 of the world economy. The launch of the institution is being seen as a landmark achievement as the 5 countries started summit talks in 2009 to counter the influence of the West. If everything goes according to plan, the new development bank will start lending in 2016. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, China's economic growth picked up speed in the second quarter, indicating Beijing's stimulus measures are starting now to take effect. Official data released on Wednesday showed the nation's GDP grew 7.5% year-on-year during the April to June period. That's slightly higher than market expectations and a rise of 2% from first quarter growth. Some analysts say further stimulus measures will be needed to meet the government's growth target of 7.5% for the entire year. Now, Korean dramas and Korean pop music, K-pop, have made a name for themselves on the global stage in recent years, but this has left many wondering whether Korean fashion will be next. Well, those taking part in the country's largest fashion trade show certainly think it will be. Park Ji-won reports.
The next global trend to come out of Korea is believed to be K-fashion, following in K-pop's footsteps. This show is part of Korea's biggest fashion business market and trade fair, which aims to help the country's up-and-coming designers venture into the overseas market. EXO, one of the hottest K-pop idol groups around, attended the opening to boost exposure of K-fashion. For designers, trade shows like this are considered the first step towards presenting their works on runways at major collections around the world. That's why young Korean designers like Kim Hee-jin participate in the fair, hoping it leads to lucrative opportunities.
In just a couple of hours, I was approached by foreign buyers from China and Italy. They said they like my designs and it seems like contracts will soon follow.
Influential foreign buyers think Korean designs have what it takes to thrive on the global market.
Back to basics in the colors and in the fabrics, but with this extreme cure about details. So everything that reminds me about a little bit like Rick Owens, Gareth Pog.
Over 120 brands and designers participate in the three-day event, which acts as a sneak preview for some of the trends that may reappear during Seoul Fashion Week in October. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Thursday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. Israeli military says it is investigating the death of 4 young boys who witnesses say were struck down by an airstrike on a beach in Gaza. Palestinian authorities said the boys were brothers and cousins between the ages of 9 and 11 and were playing on the beach when an aerial barrage struck near a hotel where foreign media were staying. A 5th boy remains in critical condition and 6 others were hurt. And in new developments this morning, Israel has agreed to a 5-hour humanitarian pause brokered by the United Nations to allow for the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Deadly rocket and missile exchanges for the past 9 days have killed at least 213 Palestinians. Hamas militants have fired more than 1,200 rockets into Israel, according to officials. The European Union is poised to expand its sanctions against Russia for Moscow's failure to take concrete steps to control the violence in Ukraine. In a meeting in Brussels, EU leaders are expected to suspend large-scale financing of Russian public sector projects by the bloc's lending institutions. They will also widen sanctions, freezing the assets of companies benefiting from or supporting the Ukrainian unrest. The names of the companies have not been released. U.S. media conglomerate Time Warner has rejected an unsolicited takeover offer by Rupert Murdoch's 21st Century Fox. The offer was estimated to be worth about $76 billion, about 60% in stock and the rest in cash. Had it gone through, it would have made the combined company as large as rival Disney in market value. Analysts say despite the rebuff, Murdoch will likely continue his pursuit of Time Warner. And finally, the United Nations says control of the AIDS epidemic is possible by the year 2030. The UN AIDS agency said AIDS-related deaths and new HIV infections have fallen globally by 1/3 in the past 10 years. Growing access to drugs and preventative measures were a couple of the many factors contributing to this picture, but it did say more international effort is needed, saying saying the fragile window of opportunity is the next 5 years.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off in swimming with Marine boy Park Tae-hwan. Of course, with the Olympic swimmer in Korea for the national trials, all eyes were on the 25-year-old and he didn't disappoint. Now, with the national team trials taking place in Incheon, Park Tae-hwan finishes off his 200-meter qualifying round with the final time of 1 minute 45.25 seconds, coming in first and setting a new event record. For Park Tae-hwan, not only did he qualify for the 200-meter event for the Incheon Asian Games in September, he also set a record for the best time this season, beating out Australia's Cameron McAvoy's time of 1 minute 45.46 seconds. And now moving over to the South Korean national football team, a day after it was reported that the KFA has been looking into Ulsan Hyundai Tigers head coach Kim Ho-gun to possibly lead the national team. Reports have now surfaced that they're also looking for a foreign coach, and it's Michael Schoenberg, a 47-year-old assistant coach of the Norwegian club Vålerenga. Now, although he's a relatively unknown coach, he has apparently been contacted by the Japanese national football team as well, according to reports from a Danish sports paper. But according to the KFA, while it is true that there is some kind of interest, their main focus at the moment is normalizing the current technical committee in the KFA before choosing their next head coach. And now moving over to some Wednesday night's KBO action, the Nexen Heroes hold on to beat the Lotte Giants 4-3 with LG crushing Samsung 9-2, and the Hanwha Eagles on fire beating the SK Wyverns 12-3. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Tucson Bears take on the NC Dinos. And of course, going into the game here, first inning of the game, Kim Hyun-soo with an RBI groundout gives the Tucson Bears the early 1-0 lead, but at the bottom of the inning, NC answers back thanks to former Tucson Bear Lee Jong-wook with an RBI single to right, tying it up before NC adds a few more runs off of Dustin Nippert. This including another former Tucson Bears Son Shi-hyun with an RBI single as the NC Dinos take a 4-1 lead after the first inning. But a roller coaster of a game as Tucson comes back to score 4 times in the 4th inning and twice in the 5th to take a 7-4 lead going into the 6th inning. But like they have throughout the season, Tucson's bullpen collapses once again, including a 4-run 7th inning as NC comes back to win this one 10-3. And now staying with baseball, but over to Japan, where South Korean slugger Lee Dae-ho will be headed to his 3rd straight NPB All-Star game. And while Lee Dae-ho has previously gone to the All-Star game after being voted by his manager and also through fan voting in the past 2 years, he now gets the nod after the players in the league voted for him to play in the All-Star game. Now, he stated that because he's a foreign player, it means that much more for the players to vote for him to the All-Star game. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning, I'm Ijeon with your weather update. Well, we have welcome rain in store today across the region. Rain is expected from the southern provinces from this morning to late afternoon, then gradually expanded to upper areas. So the whole nation will see clouds sticking around all day long. And with the nationwide monsoon rain in the forecast, temperatures should be a tad lower than yesterday. Highs in many regions will hover below 30 degrees Celsius across the region. So please keep that in mind. And let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul is starting out at 23, then the high will rise to 30, while Daegu should see a high of 32, and Gwangju and Busan will have a daily high of 27 respectively. Now for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Dokdo should see a high of 28. Daejeon will reach 29, while Mount Keungan climb to 21. Well, don't forget to have an umbrella handy on your way out for your morning and evening commute. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, those are the stories we have for you at this hour, but Korea Today is coming up with many more stories in about half an hour's time. We'll be back throughout the day with many more news updates, and I'll be back at 10 a.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.